Good morning once again to everyone that's taking part in this discussion. My name is Isaac Nyameke, and I'm doing my PhD in Alaska, and also I teach undergrad and master's courses. We have, I think, 5 papers to be discussed for this session. Abigail, Bornwell, John, Edward, Hassan, and Rudolph. So I think some of the names seems familiar, and I think they come from Ghana. So I'm also from Ghana, but I'm based in state. So, but I can't see Hassan online at the moment, and then I can also see the other colleagues. So we are going to start with John, and then from John we'll go to Bornwell, then we'll just move to Abigail and Rudolph. So when we are joined with other participants, then I'll add them up for the time being. Thank you. Okay, John, I'll put your presentation, but please, I need you over here so that they will see you. John is Joby. Okay, good. Okay, then John, take over from me. You can either stand also, but probably it's good that you stand. So now,
yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone, once more, and also to our viewers who are online. I want to welcome you to my presentation. And my name is John Kareko from Kenya, and working with an organization called West Indian Ocean Forum, which is a regional forum that looks into the welfare of small-scale fishers and the communities. I want to begin by saying that the future and sustainability of our fisheries and natural resources in general, right now we organize for a collective voice and collective action. And what Yotuna does is to try to give an opportunity or a platform for small-scale fishers and tuna fisheries and tuna-like species to have a voice, both at a local level, national level, regional level, and also try to push it to a global level. So the question is, how do we do this? Or how can we have the fishers gaining a voice? We have to recognize that it's out of the resources that we have, and especially marine resources, that we are able to have a livelihood, and also that if these natural resources are not managed in a sustainable manner, then our future is not secure, because that would mean that our food and nutrition security will be insecure. So what Yotuna tries to do is to get the communities and the fishers to self-organize to manage and safeguard their resources, and then ask ourselves, how can we as fishers and communities be part of the fisheries sector decision-making? So Yotuna comes in now to facilitate that process for self-organizing and also being part of fisheries sector decision-making. So what is Siotuna? Siotuna is a membership organization or forum, which has members from South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Seychelles, Madagascar, Comoros, Mauritius, and Somalia has also interest, but it has not come on board yet. But we are looking into it on how they can come on board. Then how is Siotuna structured? So Siotuna starts from a community level and also the civil society organizations at the base, where they all come together and form a national alliance in each country. This national alliance is then registered and is able now to get the communities and the fishers and the non-state actors in that country talking together. And then Siotuna comes as an umbrella body for these alliances in each country, so that now it can have a voice of all these alliances at a regional level, that is Southwestern Indian Ocean level. And so Siotuna just consists of a secretariat that now works together with the national alliances to be able now to correct a common voice from the fishers in the region. So what there is that fishers and the communities in each country deal with their own issues. Then Siotuna facilitates them now to be part of decision-making in that country. And then if something that goes now beyond a national level to a regional level or global level, then Siotuna comes in to also help. So, and this is just what I've explained now. We have the national alliances at the ground. Then we have the fisheries decision-making bodies and the government at the national level. Then Siotuna now goes to the regional level, and we have possible international level depending on the issues that you are working with. So what there is that Siotuna now helps the communities and the fishers to interact horizontally and also to interact particularly with the decision-making apparatus. So out of that, then we find that Siotuna tries to have representation or membership in the key decision-making areas. And currently now we have an observer status at the IOTC. So we are able to get to know what is happening, relate back to the communities and the non-state actors, and also be able to assist in pushing agenda that they want to put in place. So, and how do we make sure that we get well-focused voices from the communities and fishers? One key area for Siotuna is to build capacity of our communities and fishers to be able to get to a level where they can make informed decisions or have a voice that can be presented and earned in the key forums. So issues that come from the communities and the small-scale fishers and the tuna fisheries are filtered together in each country. Then if they require a regional level pushing, then Siotuna comes in. But then Siotuna helps each alliance in each country to be able to be at that level. And we do that also by getting them to understand the decision-making organs within the fishery sector, so that they can also get to know how to better engage with the processes and where to engage and who is important for what issues. We also prepare them for oncoming new things or emerging issues. Like now we have the sustainable blue economy. And what we are trying to do is now preparing the communities and the fishers to adopt to it and get to know what it is and be part of the process. So we have been like this and now with many countries doing the marine spatial planning, trying to really get them to understand what marine planning is, to understand the process, and how they can engage in the process so that at least they can have their views incorporated into the marine spatial planning, rather than waiting for the planning to take place and then they start complaining that they were left out. And the moment that is done and they are not represented, then you find they'll find it hard to be part of that. So they are better off being part of the planning so that at least they are able to express their views and what is good for them. Then the other important thing that we do with as you do now with our communities is also to give them exposure to what is happening in other countries. So what we usually do, we try to have them getting to meet, to share ideas and experiences. And we move, where possible, we move from one country to another, people getting to see what is happening and create networks that they are able to communicate with other people and also get to know what fishery sector looks like. And this has been very useful, not just about this. We have also found that fishers now within the region know one another face to face. They communicate by themselves. And we have found it also working as a security measure. Because what has been happening is like now, if some fishers are lost in sea, they relay messages to other countries and they say, we have these fishers who are lost. And then if you find them, let us know. And we have found that working very well because it's a communication between persons now, not just the government, between persons, and then it is taken up from there. So that has been very useful when fishers know who are other fishers within the region. And with that, I think I'll wait there and say thank you very much. That's what the thing is.
Thank you so much, John, for just coming to share with us what your institution is doing in terms of bringing the farmers and then the community together to understand how marine spatial planning is being implemented and what can be done. Our next speaker is Bornwell. So Bornwell, please. Thank you. Then I'll hand over to Dr. Bornwell.
Thank you so much. And yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I want to welcome you to this presentation. My full name is Mweru-Luapula Seemani, and I'm from Zambia. And I'm attached to the Department of Fisheries. And at the same time, I'm registered as a PhD student in my final year with the University of Pretoria. So basically, I'm going to give you just a synopsis of what I've been doing. I've been looking at the assessing the impact of invasive Parachanna species. That is the African snakehead on native Oreochromis species and other species of Mweru-Luapula fishery. This is basically a typical example of an aquaculture spillover. So that's the location of my study area. That's Mweru-Luapula in Zambia. You can see that the main part of the fishery is the lake that is shared between Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I can see that the lake is actually a shoreline of about 350 kilometers, and it caters for over 21,000 fishers. That's from a riparian community of over 300,000 people. You can see that the production levels are quite good, about 10,000 metric tons per year. That is contributing almost 13% of annual capture fisheries production for the country. And the fishery is also rich with over 105 fish species from 16 families, 17 of which are of commercial importance, and 35 are endemic. So basically, the focus of my study was attending to the challenge of the shift in species composition, distribution, and the size of species. So just to give a brief background of the invasion of Parachanna, these species were first observed in the late 1990s. This was actually observed by our local fishers and also the Department of Fisheries routine gillnet surveys that they were doing. It's believed that the species entered our lake through flooding from the aquaculture facilities in the DRC Congo, which was a typical aquaculture spillover. There was a group of scientists which were led by Serrao in 2014, who actually studied on the barcoding of these species in the Congo Basin. They identified these species as Parachanna obscura. But 3 years later, in 2017, Cote Grant came in and also identified some misidentification on the face identification. They identified that there was a new Parachanna species that was observed in the Congo Basin. And this prompted to my study to understand exactly what Parachanna species invaded our waters. So my study objectives was basically to assess whether it was Parachanna obscura or a new Parachanna species that we have in Mweru-Luapula. And I was also focusing on determining the fishing pressure and methods, if these have also contributed to changes in species composition. I also did the eDNA analysis and also DNA barcoding, but I will not talk about those two objectives for this study because of time. So basically, that was my sampling framework. You can see I collected about 90 water filtrates. That was from the 18 selected sites that were chosen for the study. I was getting 5 replications per station. And I also collected 28, in fact, there were 15 total fish fin clips, and analyzed 28 of them from 11 sites. And I also did traditional methods, which was the gillnet surveys, catch assessment surveys, and structured questionnaires. But today, I'm just going to focus on the results based on the traditional methods. So that was my area, my sampling area. You can see from the far north there, which is Lunchinda, and that stretched all the way to Molundu. You can see the sites that I visited. I think the rectangle there shows the EDN sites, and then the red shows the gillnet surveys. The triangle, green triangle shows the catch assessment sites, and the diamond shows the places where I administered the questionnaire. So this was my sampling areas. You can see on the results now, out of the 27 key informants that we interviewed, 88% of them showed the presence of this invasive Parachanna. It was caught in their catches. Only 12% expressed no contact with this invasive species. And then we can see that down there, when it came to the observation of changes in species, we see that this was first observed in the late 1990s, in 1999. That's when the fishers began to see changes in the composition of their catch. But later on in 2017, 2018, we see that this composition, this change completely shifted. And then not only that, we're seeing that there were also some trends of fish catches that were observed. We saw that there was a mushrooming of unscaled fish in the lake, in the fishery rather, and we can see that cichlids, most of the species that are scaled, are reduced in terms of numbers and catches. And not only that, we see that also the catches tilted towards Hydrocyanus vittatus and Shilbe intermediates. These are species that we dominated the catch from the fishers. We can also see from catch assessment surveys that the dominant fishes were actually sardines, intermediates, and macrocha. And the less dominant ones were pongicas and also maculators. These are species that had actually decreased from their catches. That's just a synopsis of what we did with the heat map when we did the eDNA. We can see that we also identified another invasive species in our analysis, that is water sample analysis in stratum 1. Then when it comes to, in terms of catches, length by gear, our results indicated that there was inconsistencies in biomass per set. We can see that the catch by many fishers were mainly biased towards a small size species. These are species that had length frequencies between 11 and 13 centimeters. And not only that, when you go down there, you see that in stratum 4, because the fishery is divided into 4 strata, but we have noticed that in stratum 4, the catch per unit of effort had drastically reduced. Now, very interesting is that this is the site where we discovered the invasive species. And you see that inside in stratum 3, that is, you can see that the catch per unit effort there is quite high. This one, we didn't trace any presence of the invasive species. And another interesting feature is that when we look at the size, the net sizes that are used, you see that the catches were more high when fishers are using small mesh sizes, which are illegal. That's when they were getting more. So when we did the barcodes of the species that we got the suspects for Parachanna, we see that when we did the barcoding, the phytogeograph, we see that all the samples that we get, these are the samples, you see F16, 17, all these Parachanna species were pointing us to Parachanna obscura. So in a nutshell, we can see that the species that have invaded Mweru-Luapula are actually Parachanna obscura. And these species were observed in the 2 strata of the 4 strata of the fishery, in stratum 2 and stratum 4. And very interesting is that we saw that Oreochromis species was found in all the 4 strata, but we noticed that in stratum 4, which was invaded by Parachanna, we could see that there was some reduction in terms of numbers. And also we can see that there was changes in species composition, the index of relative importance, and also the diversity, the high diversity was actually tilted towards vittatas and intermediates. And then we also noticed that there was low activity rate, yield, and catch per unit effort in stratum 4, where we noticed and found the invasive species. And also we noticed that fishing pressure or effort was tilted towards the small size species, which is not a very sustainable way to contain the fishery. My conclusion and recommendation is that, of course, as of now, we can say there is minimal impact on the presence of Parachanna on Oreochromis species, because it's only found in 2 strata of the 4 strata of the fishery. And this could actually be attributed to, of course, the presence of Parachanna. It can also be attributed to a low activity rate and also the high use of illegal gears and other environmental factors. As a study, we recommend that there must be some localized environment DNA approach that has to be done on a large scale so that we can cater for all the places that we found these species. And there's also need to to develop appropriate gear which the fishers can actually be comfortable with. And also in our future studies, we can also consider incorporating physiochemical variables and also the gonodosomatic index and also fish behavior over time to see exactly and make conclusions from our findings. And above all, we recommend that there must be some dual approach in monitoring our species. That is, we use both conventional methods and environmental DNA. That is the best way on how we can contain our species and also protect the threatened biodiversity. And thank you for your attention. I just want to recognize my funders. That is ZADEP, Zambia Aquaculture Enterprise Development Bank, that is operating under African Development Bank. I also recognize the University of Pretoria, Stellenbosch University, who helped me in analyzing my eDNA data, and many other partners. I thank you. I end here.
I would thank John so much. I said John Bornwell, so much for his presentation. I'm so much interested in environmental DNA. So his presentation is in line with what I'm going to ask him a lot. And then probably after the session, I'm going to ask him a lot of things about his study. So be careful, and then after that, we'll see how it goes. I will now move to our friend Abigail, and then Abigail would take over from.
Okay, great. Give me one moment to share the screen.
Okay, I'll give you a multiple sharing authority. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, whilst Abigail is just sharing, I will just acknowledge those that have to join us. I can see Edward, that I can see Christiana, yeah, and Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we have 8 participants online at the moment. And Abigail, I can see your presentation. So you put it on a full screen mode. Yes, that's great. Thank you so much.
That works okay? Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Isaac, for moderating our session and for all the other panelists and participants that are here. I'm Abigail Bennett. I'm an assistant professor at Michigan State University. So greetings from Michigan. But this study that I'm going to talk about today is a collaboration between scholars here at Michigan State and scholars at the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources in Malawi. So the thing that we have in common in Michigan, in the US, and Malawi, of course, is that we are both near some of the world's biggest lakes, but this study is about Lake Malawi. And so I've titled it Spatial Analysis of Food Access for Nutrition Sensitive Policy. And you can see the many different co-authors that we have there in the bottom. Okay, I hope the screen is advancing now.
Yeah.
Great. So I won't spend too much time on literature review, but I did want to put this study a little bit in the context of blue economy, since that's our session topic. And so I just want to point out 2 relevant articles. One is called Blind Spots and Visions of a Blue Economy Could Undermine the Ocean's Contribution to Eliminating Hunger and Malnutrition. And that's by Anna Farmery and co-authors, and was published last year. And they point out that there are a couple assumptions about this idea of the blue economy that may not turn out to be true. One is that growth in the blue economy will not necessarily lead to growth in blue foods. So we can't make that assumption. And then also growth in blue food production will not inevitably lead to improved food and nutrition security, especially if those blue foods are not reaching populations who are in need of the nutrition from them. Another paper is called Recognize Fish as Food in Policy and Development Funding. This is a paper that colleagues and I published last year, making the point that we should pay more attention to the food and nutrition security contributions of fisheries than we have in the past, and kind of identify some key pillars to doing that. And I want to point out 2 that are relevant to this study. One is there's a need to govern the distribution of aquatic foods as a key way to support their nutrition security contributions. So not only governing the production of fish and other aquatic foods, but also where they go after they're produced, so that they reach populations that depend on them and that need them. The others, there are a number of knowledge gaps. For example, on the nutrient content of different fish species, and on trade flows, especially at subnational levels. So understanding the different nutritional content of different fish species, and also where those species go after they're harvested, especially within a country, are important to developing nutrition sensitive aquatic food systems policy. And I just want to emphasize that we really often have very little idea of where different fish species are sold and go to after they're harvested in many countries around the world. So the study really focuses on access and the question of who has access to different aquatic foods. And so, we thought about access as a broad concept that's related to the ability of people to benefit from natural resources. And so, that has to do with a number of factors, from markets to institutions to labor and social relations, knowledge and technology, right? And so it's this multifaceted concept that has a lot of different drivers. Access, of course, is also a pillar of food and nutrition security, alongside availability, stability, and utilization of different foods. And access to food also includes both physical access to food and also economic access to food. So is it affordable? So in this study, we compared access to two different aquatic foods, chambo and Bornwell. Here's another Oreochromis species to add to the talks today. Chambo, which is a larger tilapia species harvested from Lake Malawi. The chambo catches have declined in recent years. And usipa, which is a small lake sardine and that now comprises the vast majority of fish catch from Lake Malawi. And so we wanted to understand who has access to these two different aquatic foods and start to understand what are the drivers of access to those two different fish species. Unfortunately, we didn't have any systematic data on where these two fish species were distributed and sold throughout the country after they're harvested. And so we needed to go and collect that data. So the man in the blue shirt there is Dr. Park Muhanda, who used to be a postdoc at Michigan State and is now a lecturer at Oregon State University. And he collected data on fish markets throughout the country. And what he did was follow usipa and chambo from three primary landing sites along the lake to all of the different markets where they were sold. And so here he is collecting data by the lakeside. And so he and a team of enumerators ended up conducting 846 georeferenced surveys with fish traders at 79 different fish markets that were linked to these three primary fish landing sites. And you can see here some photographs of different types of fish markets that ranged from really large urban markets like the Lilongwe Fish Market that's in the bottom kind of right of this slide, to roadside markets, more rural markets, and even kind of this basket of fish that traders will go door to door and sell. So they collected data on buying and selling location of fish, price, volume, transaction costs, processing methods, and characteristics of the fish traders, and also characteristics of the fish markets, like how many traders sold fish at each market and what species were sold there, and also the sex of the traders. So that data was enough for us to map the post-harvest flows of chambo and usipa. And you can see the map of the flows of chambo from the lake to markets around the country is, I guess it's probably on the right-hand side of your screen. It's on the left of mine. I'm not totally sure. You can see it's labeled chambo there, and the post-harvest flows of usipa. So the circle icons are the markets. The blue markets the blue dots are urban markets. The black dots are rural markets. The gray lines are wholesale trade flows, and the red lines are retail trade flows. So you can see just by looking at these maps that usipa is sold at many more markets throughout the country, and in many more districts of the country. It's sold at 72 markets. And 60% of those markets are in rural locations. 70% of the usipa sold is sun-dried, and the remainder is mostly parboiled. There's a little bit of smoked and fresh usipa sold. Chambo, in contrast, is only sold at 16 markets linked to the same three beach landing sites, and only 19% of those markets were in rural areas, so the majority were in urban areas. And most of the chambo was sold fresh, with about 20% sold smoked. So you can see already that a different subset of Malawi's population has access to usipa than to chambo. And so we overlaid this market data on top of household data in Malawi and calculated that 23% of households in Malawi were located within 5 kilometers of one of the usipa markets on the map I just showed, and 18% of Malawi's population was located within 5 kilometers of a market where chambo is sold. And so that's an indicator of physical access to fish. we wanted to also have an indicator of economic access to fish. And so we calculated what percent of those households that were in 5 kilometers, were within 5 kilometers of markets where usipa and chambo were sold, earned at least $1.35 US dollars per person per day to figure out, you know, did they have economic access? Did they have purchasing power to purchase usipa and chambo? We actually found that households located close to chambo markets, more of them earned at least this $1.35 per person per day than those located close to usipa markets. And so that indicates that on average, households close to markets where usipa sold earn less income per person. And so when we think about economic access to fish, we of course also have to think about the price of fish. And so the price per kilo of chambo is almost double that of usipa. And so one thing we did was we took data about the nutrient content, so the concentration of different nutrients and micronutrients in both of these species, and calculated the price per nutrient. And so you can see here in this first column, dried chambo, that a lot of these price per nutrient figures are higher than this third column, dried usipa, and are higher for fresh chambo as well. Of course, remember that most of the chambo is sold fresh. Unfortunately, there's no nutrient content data for many of these micronutrients in fresh chambo. And so this just comes back to this limitation that we don't have a lot of data on the nutrient content of some of these fish species. And these chambo species are also not exactly the ones that we find most commonly at markets. So I'll skim over this slide so that I don't take too much of anyone else's time, but we also found that there's differences in the percentage of traders at these markets who are female. And so there's potentially different gender dimensions of food security and food access as you move from region to region across these markets. So just briefly, some policy implications. You know, this type of understanding of food access to different fish species and what happens in the post-harvest realm, especially spatially, we think is important for thinking about how to support fisheries that have currently high food access, or thinking about how to enhance access to fish species that don't that aren't accessible by populations, especially nutritionally vulnerable populations. It's also a basis for identifying factors driving distribution and access, and thinking about creative kind of policy and program interventions to enhance access in specific places that may need greater access to these foods. And then it's also, I think, allows some potential for more integration of fisheries and nutrition policies. For example, information like this could be the basis for citing nutrition programs, encouraging women and young children to eat fish, or school feeding programs and things like that want to utilize aquatic foods. So those are just a few of the policy implications of understanding these spatial post-harvest dynamics of different fisheries. I'll quickly acknowledge the institutions and funders that were involved in this project. We had a lot of our funding from the Alliance for African Partnerships, so thanks to them for enabling this study, and with some references, and wrap it up there. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you so much, Abigail. I really enjoyed your talk. As we are moving to a blue economy, we have to look at about the food nutrition aspect. As you say, blue economy may not necessarily lead to the blue food. So what can we do to ensure that it has to be improved for the school feeding program? Our next speaker is Rodolphe. So I'll just hand over to Rodolphe to share his presentation.
Hi everyone, and thanks a lot, Isaac, for facilitating the session. My name is Rodolphe de Villers. I'm a senior research scientist at a French research institute, national research institute called IRD. I'm based in Réunion Island, so not far away from you guys. I'm next to Mauritius and Madagascar, but I unfortunately I was planning to come in person.
Pass by for a coffee.
And I'm going to present an overview of a project, of an ongoing project in which many people who are in the room with you at the moment in Cape Town, Mark Leopold, Ratanashwan Pagdi, for example, Thierry, Vivian, the team from Madagascar, and some other people from Kenya and Nigeria, and many other people are involved in, which looks at the link, trying to better understand the links between small-scale fisheries and the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG. So the project is named Fish to Sustainability, and is founded by the Belmont Forum, which is in partnership with different funding agencies. So we all heard about SDGs, you know, those lofty high-level goals internationally that we should all aspire to, but you know, sometimes that's what they are. They're very lofty and they're very like general targets, far away from, you know, our interest. So we're trying to see in this, in the context of this project, trying to better understand how small-scale fisheries components and activities influence the different SDGs. And this has been captured, for instance, that the SDG target 14B that many of you probably know, which is specifically on small-scale fisheries. So it's to provide access small-scale fisheries, small-scale artisanal fisher to marine resource and markets. But as many of you know, the impact of small-scale fisheries as a sector is not only restricted to this specific target and is like distributed amongst many other targets. So I'm going to give you more details. This has been studied or discussed by many initiatives. So here I'm showing you a figure that comes from the small-scale fisheries guidelines from the FAO. Where you can see different targets, different SDG targets, and different components of the small-scale fisheries. So, for instance, in terms of target, you get no poverty, zero hunger, the life below water, so SDG 14, which is the one for the ocean. And scientists as well have explored those questions or started to explore those questions. So, for instance, the paper from Alicia Said and Ratanashwan Pagdi in 2019 that was related to the topic. So we also know that if small-scale fisheries contribute to SDGs, sometimes contributions can be done at the cost of negative contributions somewhere else, and we call that trade-off, okay? So sometimes a contribution to one SDG also contribute to another SDG, but sometimes if you contribute to something, you actually negatively contribute to something else. So this is also something that has been explored. So this is a paper from Gerald Singh, in 2018, who looked at different targets, so horizontally SDG 14.1, 14.2, and all that. So different targets for the SDG 14, the ocean SDG, in relation to the 17, or actually 16 here, SDGs. And what you can see is like co-benefits dominates the landscape. So in blue, light blue, dark blue, but you can see also some trade-off represented in red in some cases. So back to what we're looking at, we're trying to look at the contribution of small-scale fisheries to SDG, but we're also trying to characterize the nature of this relationship. You know, is it a positive relationship, a negative relationship, a lack of relationship? And why do we do that? Is because we're trying to use that as a stepping stone to something further, which is the concept of pathways. So pathways is a theory from sustainability science, which is basically trying to understand how you go from an initial state to a final state, which is desire, and the different path you can follow to go from A to B. So on the left of the pathways here, so you get a little schema, you know, we're based on the left, which is the current status. And what we want to is aspire to improving our contribution to various SDGs. And to understand that, we need to understand alternatives, scenarios, different way of doing things, changing the governance, changing different component of the structure of small-scale fisheries in order to optimize our contribution to SDGs. So for this, we put together an international project. So it's a 2 years project. It's a pilot project. So it's just trying to test some concept. And we have about 30 experts or scientists from 12 different countries. So you get the map on the bottom right here. And in addition to those 30 experts, we have 16 organizations that are located in 6 countries that we use as case studies. So in Africa, because we're at the African meeting, this is Nigeria, Kenya, and Madagascar. And our team is very interdisciplinary. So it's not only like fisheries expert, but it's also experts in political science, sociology, but also geography and economics, data science, spatial science, and all that. So what we're trying to aim is first reinforce communities of practices nationally. So in those countries that we're studying that I mentioned, then we're trying to design new approach, and that's going to be the focus of my talk. Approaches that can capture those interactions between, on one side, the small-scale fisheries sector, and on the other one, the Sustainable Development Goals, using indicators. Then we're going to try to identify also what are the sources of data that exist, what are the data gaps that can help inform those indicators. And we're going to try to better understand synergies and trade-offs, like I was telling you, that exist in those relationships. And then ultimately, at the very end of the project, we're going to identify pathways, or at least like preliminary pathways we can explore possibly in a further project. So this is the general structure of the project, going from the top to the bottom. So it's I told you it's a 2 years project. We structured it in 3 main components, and it's pretty simple. The top one is basically trying to understand the situation and developing a method. So we call that a rapid appraisal method framework. And it's basically trying to capture this relationship between small-scale fishers and the SDGs. And it's based on the literature review, experts, and this work package is led by Dr. Shwempagdi, who is with you at the conference. Then the second work package is the package where we take this method developed in the first work package and we deploy it in countries, in actual case studies to study actual fisheries. And this, we do it in 2 different contexts or continents. We have 3 countries in Africa, the one I mentioned, Kenya, Madagascar, Nigeria. And we also have a counterpart in Latin America with Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico. So the idea is trying to understand those relationships in different contexts to better look at the realm of possibilities, if you want. And this second work package is led by Dr. Esther Fondo from Kemfree, who was also a participant, I think, online at the conference earlier this week. And the last package, led by Dr. Mark Leopold from IRD, and he's in the room probably with you as well, or at the conference at least, is going to basically put this back together. So everything, all the data collected and the lessons learned in the countries, in the case studies, back together, trying to make sense of them by synthesizing the information, trying to see if we have any pattern and all that. So in this project, told you it's a 2 years project, we're more or less there. Where basically we concluded the work package 1 and we're starting the work package 2. So most of my presentation or the rest is going to describe what's the work we've been doing to develop the method and then the plans we have to implement it. So this work started like any good academic work by a literature review, trying to see what has been done before, what exists. And one thing, so I'm not going to get into details, but Rachel, who is in our team, used a number of keywords, looking at Sustainable Development Goal, artisanal fisheries, small-scale fisheries, and all that, and concept of indicators. And then from that, extracted a number of papers, reviewed them, and trying to look at the geographic scope, their link, if there was an actual link to SDGs in the paper, and then she basically extracted 41 papers that she then read and reviewed in full, that were addressing the topic, where she tried to look at the link that were mentioned in those papers with different targets from different SDGs. So this is just a screenshot of some of those papers and some of those targets. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like. From that, so this content has then been completed or complemented by different things. So there was, in addition to the manual screening of the papers, there has been an automated screening of the paper using a tool that is called linked SDGs, that is kind of text mining, if you want, the documents, and then complemented by experts' opinions. And from that, and that's already a novel content, it's been seen that out of 169 targets from the SDGs, 32 were shown to directly, small-scale fisheries had a direct impact on those 32 targets. And you can see them on the left. So some of them are not surprising. So in y-axis, you get the percentage of targets, the share of targets for each SDG. So if for any given SDG, small-scale fisheries were contributing to all the targets, it would be 100%. So you see, it's never the case, but sometime for the targets SDG 14, for instance, you get 40%. But then you see strong contribution for no poverty, zero hunger, so not surprisingly, also for the workforce economic growth. And you see no documented contribution of fisheries. Doesn't mean there is none. It means that, in the papers, the direct link hasn't been mentioned explicitly. Quality education, afford clean energy, clean water sanitization, and all that. So I'm talking, that's important, about direct impacts. So quality education, for instance, if fishery give you a job and the job gives you money and the money gives you access to education, that's an indirect causal effect, but that's not what we're evaluating. We're evaluating the direct impact because that's the only thing we can assess here. So from that, or in parallel to that, we developed the rapid assessment method, which is basically identifying criteria. So you see the criteria, they're probably very small to read, but they are the small boxes. And then from the literature, so on the other end, we looked at the SDGs, the targets, and the indicators that exist that describe the targets. And we try to link our indicators or our variables for small-scale fisheries to those. And then we design a method where people can document it using a scoring, which is like low, medium, high, depending on how those characteristics are thought by experts to contribute to the targets. And we developed a web tool that allows people as an individual or as a group to document that. So those are just screenshots of those online surveys that are going to be used in our field work. And then there is also, like, once we are going to have the data collected, are going to come like questions of data aggregation. So obviously, like this is an example. So we just took part of the entire framework, and I just show you a detail for the SDG 12. And you see that the SDG 12 here is composed of 3 targets, but I show you only 2. And the target can have different variables. And then each variable is assessed by the people. So from the individual assessment of each target or each variable, we'll have to derive an assessment of targets and then turn a contribution to SDGs and all that. So there is literature on this, on how to aggregate, that we're going to look at more carefully and see our options. And then finally, we're going to, and we're in the process right now to try to work with our team, our international team, to identify case studies, so fisheries, and sometimes they're marine, sometimes they're freshwater case, and in the 6 countries, so Mexico, Ecuador, Colombia, and Nigeria, Kenya, and Madagascar. And you see that all together, there are going to be about like 50 to 70 case studies that are going basically to take our web interface, document the contribution, and then we're trying to analyze them to understand in those fisheries the actual relationship with the SDGs, and from those individual contributions, trying then to understand how they relate. So just to finish, so basically we have those SDGs and we need to better understand how we contribute to them, because countries have to report on those. We started by a literature review. trying to get an idea of the links that exist in the literature at the general level. But then we developed a rapid assessment tool that helps characterize those links in specific contexts, in specific countries and fisheries. By the way, this is a tool that we, could be used in other countries, and feel free to contact us for that if you're interested. Currently, we're deploying the tools in 50 or more than 50 case studies, including more than 40 in Africa. And the next step will be to synthesize the knowledge and then trying to lead to identifying different pathways that can maximize the contribution to the SDGs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Rodolphe. I have enjoyed the presentation, and my understanding is that they wanted to find out how SDG is influenced, how SSF is going to influence SDGs. And I'm very interested to note that the SSF is influencing 32 out of 163. So it's so wonderful. And then, like, how amazed that they have so many partners and experts on this projects. So, like, I'll just open the floor to those online if they have anything that they would like to share with us, and then we'll just come back to the in-person then. Okay, I'll just give a brief update to those online. We had a presentation from John. John talked about how his institution is trying to help the local communities to understand marine spatial planning, and also engage them before anything could be done. And then we also had a presentation from Bornwell. Bornwell talks about how they are trying to use eDNA to identify invasive species in terms of aquaculture split over for his PhD. We had another presentation from Abigail from Michigan State on his study from Malawi, how blue economy is going to influence nutrition and how we can help develop that aspect. And our last presentation is from our friend Rudolph. So now, those online.
Yeah, hello.
Hey, Idris, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Unfortunately, I missed you on the last the last panel, the internet.
Yeah. It's very important I couldn't finish the presentation, but I just want to say I enjoyed the Rodolphe presentation about linking the SF to that of the SDGs, and I think it is an eye-opening for most people to know the importance of the small scale fisheries contributing to the, what do you call it, SDGs. So it's just a compliment I wanted to add, not anything like a question. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just mention that I'm managing the project, but a lot of the work is done actually by Rachel on the video conference. Rachel Bitoun, the one doing cave diving there. I don't know if you see it on the screen. So she's the one that deserved the congratulations.
This is Ratana. This is Ratana. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, the thing is, I just promoted Rachel to be a panelist, so that way Rachel can also say a few things or help answer questions.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for joining us. I didn't know that. Oh my God. Okay, I'll just hand over to anyone online.
Can I ask a question to the Rodolphe and the team that just presented? I'm curious if you see differences, or maybe you haven't looked necessarily, but between inland and marine fisheries in terms of the kind of trade-offs and relevance to different SDGs that come through in the literature.
So Yeah, Rachel can expand, but the short answer is first, we have not collected the data yet between the fisheries, so we don't have the outcome of the analysis. But just in the design of the method, the current indicators for the SDGs are largely based on SDG 14 on marine fishery. So there was actually a big gap for terrestrial aquatic freshwater fishery. Which created a problem because some people decided they wanted to use the method in aquatic in freshwater fishery, and that was not very suitable based on the indicators that are currently in the literature.
If I can add on that, so yes, the framework was originally planned for inland for coastal fisheries. However, in Colombia, it was very important to assess inland fisheries. They want to have more insight on the contributions to these fisheries, to the SDGs. So going into the UN indicators, we realized that, for example, target 14.B, so on fisheries, does include inland fisheries. So there has been some adaptations to these targets to include a broader typology of small-scale fisheries. But that is also something we're exploring within this project to see how we can include various type of fisheries.
Yeah, maybe counterintuitively, I think it's maybe I forget which one it is, but life on land, I think may even potentially have some relevant indicators.
Yeah, definitely. So that's something that those specific case studies will explore as part of an alternative assessment for those specific fisheries. But yeah, there was an excellent paper on inland fisheries and the relationship to the SDGs of Lynch in 2020, which also states that there's a difficult integration of this type of activity in the SDGs. So that will also come as part of the criticism in the UN frameworks.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Rachel. Is there any more online? Okay, then I will just open up to those in person if you guys have any thoughts or discussion for those they presented. Yes, please, because the speaker is so far.
All right, thank you. My question is directed to Bruno, the one who was standing on the SDGs, linking them to small-scale fisheries. I just wanted to find out on the countries that are involved, because I just mentioned it's about 16 countries. What are those? Are they African countries or the European countries?
Yeah, it's scientists from there is some echo on the thing. There are scientists from 16 different countries, but we only use the method in 6 countries, and 3 are in Latin America and 3 in Africa. So it's Madagascar, which probably you have some representative in the room with you, Thierry, for instance, an economist. There is Nigeria with Shehu Akintola, which I think is also present in the room or at the conference. And there is Kenya, and our contact is Kempfree Fisheries Institute. So Kenya, Madagascar, Nigeria in Africa. That's all.
All right. And I didn't get you clear. You said something on freshwater, like the model can't work?
Yeah, so for the Latin America case studies, so the 3 countries in Latin America, we had some interest about freshwater fishery or inland fishery, which can be, lake, rivers.
Thank you. Can I ask another one?
Yes.
I can't remember. My colleague from Tanzania, I was very interested in the production of octopus. But I noticed that the production figures were so fluctuating. It's 9. What would be the problem for such large fluctuations of production? Maybe you can come. Well, I have also a master who have something else to say later. Thank you for the chance, although my panel was earlier this morning, probably some of you didn't attend it, but for you who are here and were able to attend, it's like I said there were cases for fluctuations, and I mentioned the case in serial number 5 in 2020, where there was a problem with the COVID. So the harvest, they closed it for more than 6 months because they couldn't open for harvesting. The time when they want to harvest, because I said the market is outside, it's not within the country. So they sell outside. So the purchase and also the restriction of travel was not possible. So they couldn't open up for harvesting. Also, they have a problem with the security taking care of the reef. The reef is quite big. It's a big area. So when you close for harvesting for a season, like in 3 months' time, before you open up, there are some people who will come in and they start collecting octopus before it is officially opened for harvesting. I said there is also a problem with the collection of data. Some of the people who harvest the octopus, they don't go to the BMU to report the amount of octopus they have harvested. So they give sometimes false data to the BMU. So one would have collected like 20 kilos and would only report 15 or 12 kilos. That's the weakness they are facing. And so they are working to make sure that they improve this. Also, there is those are the key problems that they are facing. I could mention for now. I'll let my colleague Almas to say more about that.
Hello, this is Almas. The other reason for the variation in the seasonality, the period in which they harvest. There are seasons which are better for the harvesting, and there are seasons which are not good, and that's why there are such kind of variation. But still, the most important issue, the governance, because if you don't control it, a lot of people come poaching, other things. So it becomes very difficult to have the data which are really relevant. But what is good is that because of the closure and the control, they have been able to conserve and achieve more than they used to collect when they were not doing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have a question for Abigail, John, and Bornwell? Okay, I can't see any hand in person, and then there's no one also online. So I would like to thank everyone for coming, and thank you so much for sharing your findings with us. I have learned a lot that you can use eDNA to identify invasive species, and we can also understand how FFS is influencing SDGs and how blue economy may not necessarily lead to a blue food, and how we can improve our nutrition for food to improve a healthy life. These are the things I have learned from this session, and I'm taking it home. And one thing that came from the last presentation was that they have not been able to identify specifically how SSF is influencing education. So anybody who is interested can just look it up and see how they can come about with that findings. It will be very happy to just see how this indicators can be answered. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you for moderating, Isaac.
Oh, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Bye-bye. I'll be in touch, Abigail. And Rob.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.